So Rushil has asked a question on our VCE Methods School forum asking for revision tips. So I'm just going to read this out. Hey guys, just wondering if you have some revision tips for methods that work really well. Me personally, I find it pretty hard on how to revise for methods apart from just doing worksheets. Just want to know what you all do to revise for a test or SAC. So I'm just going to preface this by saying there's no ideal way for preparing a test or a SAC, but what you should do is base it off what other successful people have done and see what scores they've received. Because the best way of getting information is just by seeing, past statistics. So if you have friends or older siblings or past students that your teachers know of, just ask them how they studied. That's the best way of figuring out it's the most likely way of figuring out what works for you and your standard. Because especially if you go to a certain type of school, usually the standard at a school is pretty similar. So I went to a pretty good, relatively good public school. So the standard for most people was pretty similar, apart from like people on, extreme sides of the spectrum. And then if you go to a selective school, obviously it's going to be different. If you go to a different public school, it might be different again. So it just depends on who's around you. So I would definitely just base your I would say that would be the first point of action, or the first, call for action, is to see how people have done, or see what people have gotten or what scores they've received, and work backwards to see how they've actually revised for it. And when I say how they revise for it, usually I'm talking about, the time that they commit, and also, what they actually do, how they divvy up that time. So my first tip, and my number one tip for everyone in VCE methods and just VCE in general for all subjects, get 2 to 3 weeks ahead of your class schedule. And I talked about this in previous videos as well, but if you get 2 to 3 weeks ahead of class schedule, what that means is, first off, reading through the textbook and understanding the theory through reading the textbook, and then try out some examples, and then watch the video on the VCE Methods School here. So watch the theory video, and then try our application questions as well, and then watch our application video. So if you do all those things before you go to class, that's already 5 times that you've learned the content and relearned it. So again, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but if you do that, then your curve of forgetting increases and the amount that you retain increases as well. And so you'll forget less. So you're increasing the stimuli of the content. So you're increasing the amount of times, or increasing the frequency that you expose yourself to the content. And in turn, that'll help you memorize everything that you need to know, or remember everything you need to know. Because probably, same for you, same for everyone else, me included, if you just read something once, then you'll forget it. And if you read it twice, then you'll remember a bit more. And if you expose yourself a third time, then you remember even more. So this way, if you do the 5 things that I said, so reading through the textbook, trying the textbook questions, watching our theory video, watching our application video, and then doing our worksheet questions, that's 5 times that you've already learned the content. And this is before you've even covered it in class. So imagine if you listen in class as well, that'll just, the pieces will come together. So like a jigsaw puzzle, and everything will come together. So as you go through the jigsaw puzzle, you'll realize that, it's much easier to figure out what comes next because you have less pieces left over. So that's kind of the analogy that I use as well. You're continuing the jigsaw puzzle, and then you have less pieces left over, so it's much easier to fill in those gaps. So that would be my advice. And then if you add your teacher's learning, that'd be 6. If you do exercises in the textbook that your teacher allocated, that's 7. If you specifically revise for a SAC and you relearn the content again, that's 8. You're just increasing the amount of stimulus that you have. And that's the best way to learn, and that's the best way to not forget things. So that's kind of point 1 and 2. So start that 2 to 3 weeks ahead of when you're meant to do it in class, and just keep on exposing yourself to the material. And it doesn't have to necessarily be for a long time. It could literally just be watching my video, or it could just be trying my worksheet, or it could just be reading through the textbook, which will probably take 10 to 15 minutes per subtopic. Just all those things really add up, and those things don't take too long either. So that's a really good way of revising just for theory. And then I guess the second part of your question is just want to know what you all do to revise for a test or SAC. The best way of doing it is just practicing. At this point, if you've done your work 2 to 3 weeks before class and then you've gone to class, you should really be up to scratch with the theory. Then it just comes to doing application-specific problems and trying them, because the questions in the textbook and the questions in the theory part of the worksheets that we have, they're just for learning. I mean, obviously you need to know them because that's a foundational knowledge that you need to have to succeed when you're doing Saxon exams, but the actual questions that you get in Saxon exams are completely different. And it's all about, the application of them. So those questions are worded very differently. And a lot of the time, they're a lot harder to see what to do. And that's for multiple reasons. First off, it's hidden behind a wall of application and a wall of modeling, the wall of modeling problems. So you kind of have to sift through that information. And also, a lot of people kind of overlook this, but when you do questions in the textbook, you know what the process is already because you just know what the subtopic is. But when you do a test or exam, things aren't split up by, this question is inverse functions, this question is composite functions, this question is differentiation. You don't know that because the test is not split up like that. So you need to sift through the content or sift through the question and figure out what concepts are actually needed to answer that question. And that's one thing that a lot of people overlook because they just do all of their questions. Every single one of their questions comes from the textbook, which if you're doing exercise 1E, for example, and it's composite functions, you know what the process is because it's been exactly the same for that whole subtopic or that whole subchapter. But when you go to a test, it's completely different. You have to figure that out for yourself. And a lot of people do overlook that. So I'd say if you just do practice questions, but you don't order them, that's the best way to go. If you do practice questions and they're ordered, it doesn't really hit the same because you can predict what's going to happen. So that's actually, I've kind of just reminded myself, maybe we should release some resources, but it's not grouped up by topic. It's just a mix. And by having modeling questions that are that contain multiple topics, that kind of solves that issue because it doesn't really give away how to actually answer the question. So thanks, Rochelle, for this question. That actually helps a lot with my planning for SAC 1. Lynn says, you should source out practice questions and have a clear and straightforward notes, as well as seeking help from friends, teachers, or tutors. Obviously, really good advice. Now, it's easier said than done to source out practice questions. We have a lot here, but you might want variety. So I'd say ask your teacher for resources. That'll be the best point of action. The review topics or the review chapters in the textbook are really good as well, and they're really untapped. So you have the end of chapter review, which will go through modeling questions for those specific problems, but then the textbook has dedicated review chapters, I think. Let's just open up. This is the old 1-2 methods textbook, but I think it's organized in the same way. So I just kind of want to show you what I'm talking about. These ones here. So chapter 8, review of chapter 2 to 7. These are perfect because these are not grouped by exercises as such. Obviously, it's from chapter 2 to 7, but that's a really wide range. So if you look at these questions, you actually don't know what topic they're part of, unless you can tell from the question. So before starting this, I would have known that this is linear, but as you read it, you can kind of tell that it's linear. This is polynomial factorization. This is just function notation. This is function notation again, simultaneous equations, pretty obvious, solve the simultaneous equations. But you can see that if you do these review exercises, that these ones are not grouped by chapter. So these are actually really good to use. And again, really untapped because they're not really allocated 2 weeks in class. I noticed that when I was going through VCE methods, they didn't really allocate these questions to work, but I did it for revision and it worked out really great. But I wouldn't rely on this purely. As Lynn said, you should source out your own practice questions. And yeah, straightforward notes is good as well. I think having organizing your notes in a certain way, in a way that you like, is really important as well. And it makes it enjoyable. I'm trying to think of the word, romanticizing. So there's this really big thing on social media that you might have seen. It's romanticizing the way that you study. So doing your notes in a way that you actually like. So organizing them and just presenting your notes in a way that actually you appreciate is really good because it makes you enjoy it. It's the same as if you buy your favorite pen and you do work using your favorite pen only, then you actually enjoy doing the work because you're using your favorite pen. It's kind of just making things a lot, it's kind of lowering the barrier to doing things. I don't like this pen. I'm not going to do my study today. I don't like my book. I don't like the way that I structure my notes. I'm not going to do my study today. If you kind of fix all of those things, as in fix them in terms of you keep them fixed, then that will help you to preventing your barriers to study. And it's going to actually help you enjoy it. And that's something that I noticed during uni as well. I didn't really do that in high school because I didn't think that deeply about those things. I did that more in uni where, I had a note structure that I really liked, and I had a way of structuring my questions that I really liked, and it's pretty much just the way I did in high school, because that's where I felt that I was doing well. And then when I went to uni, I didn't really structure my notes that much at the start, and then I realized that the time when I was studying the best was in year 11 and 12. So I resorted back to that way of structuring notes. It's very simple. It's just like dividing the page down the middle, and then you have like the theory, and then you have the application questions following that, and then you continue that throughout all the topics. Ben, either do past exam questions on the relevant area of study, or buy one of the ATAR Notes topic test books that have practice sacks for each area of study. Good advice. You can buy it if you want. We'll give out one for free probably. So you can buy that if you want. For variety, we'll probably give out one when it comes closer to SAC 1, and it's going to be something similar to a VCE checkpoints book. Obviously, you can imagine it's for the whole year, so it does take a long time to write, but that should be ready in time for your first SAC. And it would last you the whole year as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. I mean, I'm not too sure of the ATAR Notes quality or the quality of their topic test books. I've just heard that ATAR Notes in general, I've heard things about ATAR Notes, like some good, some bad, so I can't say one way or another if it's something that I would recommend, but whatever, more resources can't hurt. Kira Lee, I think that's how you pronounce it. I really find the textbook helpful. I don't know about you, but I have the Cambridge textbook, and after every time I have class, I will do one question from a previous topic to make sure I'm instilled how to do what we might have done last week, making sure I don't forget, and then I do a couple of harder questions of what we did the previous class, and I find if I find any recurring issues, I would go to my teacher during one of my frees and sort this out. This helps me stay on track as my class is zooming through topics. Well, if your class is zooming through topics, that is a very good sign. So Kira has a good point. If you kind of go back and go back to previous topics and you try it again, and just kind of like make sure that you understand it, make sure that you remember it. And I think I said it in this video, but the curve of forgetting. By going back and seeing that you know things, it's like refining that knowledge, and then you're adding another piece of stimulus. So you're going through most of the textbook when you learn the theory, or after you learn the theory, and then you go back later again and you see, if what you remember. Because a lot of the time when people, do all these things and then they go to tests, there's still a couple of things that they don't know how to do, which is completely fine. And then it's just a matter of going back and refining that again, and just like a continuous, continual refining process. That's what I would call the best way of thinking about how you study in VCE methods.